Welcome to Natality. I'm a psychoanalytic psychotherapist and I work with what happens in the mind when you're becoming a parent. Today, I'm beginning a two-part series of something that affects more and more pregnant women and also new mothers, and this is fear of ecological catastrophe. In this episode, I want to talk about why this fear tends to arrive with such force during pregnancy and where it comes from. In the next episode, I will talk about where it leads and what to do with it. In recent years, international medical organizations have begun saying openly that the climate crisis is actually a health crisis. Extreme heat, air pollution, flooding, all of this has very measurable effects on the course of pregnancy, on fetal health, on the health of newborns. This knowledge is important and increasingly available. And alongside it come practical recommendations what to do and how to protect yourself, meaning how to minimize the risk. Often the advice naturally is to avoid going out or staying away from certain places. But alongside all of that, and this is what I want to talk about today, there is something else. There is this natural longing to be closer to nature. You want to go for a park, a forest, fresh air, be in contact with the earth. That longing has a particular meaning in pregnancy, and I will explain why in a moment. It can also be very hard because air on some days is too polluted, the heat is too intense. That what draws you in is also what you need to protect yourself from. And that can create very quiet but very real feeling of disappointment, of loneliness, as if something important is unavailable precisely now when you actually need it most. That absence often reveals how much you would, in fact, like to be much closer to nature. Because behind that fear, that echo anxiety, lies a whole spectrum of emotions actually. A sadness, a grief, anger, guilt, helplessness, a sense that something is being lost irreversibly or has already been lost. Researchers have begun calling this eco-distress actually, a broad emotional experience that goes beyond fear alone. So it's not only dread of the future, it is also grief for the world as it is, for a nature that is ailing, for the feeling that you're leaving your child a planet in worse condition than the one you were born into. Why, as a new mother, you're particularly open to this experience, and what can be done with that? To understand this, I need to say something about how we ordinarily manage our awareness of the climate crisis. Because most of us, most of the time, somehow manage. We know, and yet we buy, we fly, we live. Despite our awareness, we protect ourselves from the part of it that is unbearable. Psychological defenses such as repression, denial, or splitting are not in themselves pathological. They're a normal, a necessary part of mental functioning. They help us regulate the intensity of what we experience. Without them, you would be flooded by very difficult truth all at once. The problem arises when defenses organize themselves into something which is more rigid, when they become not so much a regulation of how much you can bear, but a wall, when splitting is not a temporary protection, but a permanent structure that separates your knowing from your feeling. When what you know about the state of the planet never reaches the part of you that could truly feel it and then do something with it, for example. Sally Weintraub, a psychoanalyst who has written about her own ecological awakening, describes how the culture we live in actively reinforces and maintains these defensive organizations. A culture that says you are entitled to an exception and you deserve more. Your needs come before the limits of the planet. A culture like this makes the split between knowing and feeling into something systematic, something supported from the outside, not only generated from within. And in that culture, your empathetic, caring part, the part that genuinely feels its connection to other forms of life, gets split off, pushed aside, devaluated even. Because if we truly felt we would have to change too much, we would have to give up our sense of exceptionalism, for example, the belief that we deserve more comfort, more consumption, more freedom from consequences of our choices, for example. And pregnancy, through a state of particular openness and closeness to one's own body, can begin to loosen that rigid organization, not through force, not through confrontation, but simply through the fact that you're now closer to what is real, fragile, and dependent. That your psyche is oriented toward attunement rather than walling off, for example. Pregnancy places you, in the most literal and psychological sense, at the epicenter of dependency. A small developing life inside you has an enormous influence on your body, your sleep, your mood, your hunger, your breath. And you have an absolute influence on it. This is mutual dependency. It's in its most primal, inescapable form, actually. That state does something to the psyche. You come closer to your own body in a way that is often entirely new. The body stops being something you manage, becomes something you inhabit, something you're creating together with the child in your womb. And that closeness to your own physicality, to your own interdependence, opens something deep, because that dependency resonates with something you already know, though you may not remember it, with your own experience of being a very small child, of being entirely dependent on your mother. And that layer can now steer back into your life with all its ambivalence, with gratitude and anger, with longing and disappointment, with grief for what wasn't there, and the shock of discovering how deeply actually those early dependencies shaped who you are today. So, pregnancy is in large part a process of revising the internal image of the mother, what you carry within you from your own experience of being a daughter, an image that is often a mixture of what was good and what was wounded, for example, what was given and where there was failing. In pregnancy, that image comes alive again because you're becoming a mother, and that sets in motion a very deep process of questioning. what kind of mother do I want to be? What do I want to give? And what do I want to repair? That wish to repair, we in psychoanalysis call it reparation, is one of the deepest motivations of the human psyche. And in pregnancy, it is particularly alive. Weintraub points out that something similar takes place in our relationship with nature, and that the two are connected at the root. Nature, as you know, has always been in human imagination and symbolism an image of the mother, a mother who nourishes, gives, surrounds us with good things. And just as in the relationship with the internal mother, we can take up different positions towards her, actually. We can idolize or devalue her. We can feel dependent on her and repress that. We can take without giving in the conviction that we are entitled, that she's unlimited, that she will manage on her own. Weintraub writes that our cultural inability to face the climate crisis has the same psychological roots as the difficulty of facing our own dependency on the mother, on someone we were entirely dependent upon, yet whom we also wanted to treat as an inexhaustible source, for example. The splitting that allows us to use nature without a sense of responsibility is akin to the splitting that allows us to not feel that the mother too had her limits, her pain, her needs. And pregnancy, precisely because it sets in motion such a deep process of revising the image of the mother, can actually simultaneously open something in the relationship with nature. When you begin to feel yourself as a mother and to work through what your own mother was for you, you may begin to feel your dependency on something larger in a different way, on the earth, on the water, on the air, and to feel differently the fact that this earth is ailing. It's not by chance that many women in pregnancy feel the pain of planet's condition for the maybe first time in a truly personal way. It is the same psychological movement toward the reality of dependency that we tend to bypass at a certain point in life, and which returns in pregnancy to be more deeply revisited. So, in the next episode, I will talk about what happens next, how this new sensitivity changes the way you see the world around you, and why it can feel so isolating and what to do with it. About grief that can become a source of strength rather than paralysis, actually. If what I've said today resonates with your experience, feel free to write in the comments. I want to know how it is for you. This is all for today. See you in the next episode.